TechPod. Thank you guys for coming to our next event. I'm here with Shefumi and Helen, both co-founders of Collab. Very, very excited to talk to them today. Just before we get into it, I'll go ahead and give myself a quick introduction so you guys know who I am, and then we'll obviously get into Helen and Shefumi's intro as well. So I'm Zayn Patel, 17 years old, doing a couple of things outside of TechPod. I'm developing AR tools for special education students. I'm also a creator at Georgetown University, so I'm building new schools, what the new age of education looks like. And then at TechPod, I'm the brand growth and social media strategist, so launching a couple of different creative initiatives that all of you guys have been able to see. And then for those of you guys that are new to TechPod, we're a startup that empowers young professionals to break into the business side of tech. And we do have a couple resources. One thing we always love to share is our newsletter. We send this out every Thursday. If you guys are interested, go ahead, take a look and hit subscribe. We just launched a new secret project, so make sure to check out the Google form there if you guys want to be a part of it. But Helen, Shefumi, incredible people. Why don't you guys go ahead and start with a quick introduction on who you are, Collab, and maybe why you guys started it.
You trying to start now?
Shefumi always forces me to start. Well, hi everyone, I'm Helen. I am not 17 years old. I feel like, Zayn, you have so much, a lot of credibility. I don't even know how to follow up your introduction.
Yeah.
But at least for me, I was born in China, immigrated to Canada, where we're now both in Toronto. As a young kid, I went to the University of Waterloo, where I studied earth science. And then from there, realized that, hey, I'm not really that interested in earth science. And sort of made my pivot into tech that way. Somehow I managed to sort of land in the industry in a weird, well, I have no other option type of way. But after graduation, I was at Microsoft as a product manager for the past 4 years. And afterwards, with the pandemic, decided to move back home to Toronto for a little bit. And that's actually when Shefumi and I started talking again about, hey, let's maybe work on some stuff while it's boring, it's pandemic, etc. And that's sort of how Collab started up, at least for me. But Shefumi actually has a completely different story. I'm the one who is not at all about entrepreneurship. So I feel like he is actually the one to give a much more compelling understanding of everything.
Hi everyone. First of all, shout out Zayn. Like your intro was like super awesome. Very, very impressed with what you've been able to do so far. So honestly, keep up the amazing work. So I just wanted to just like, first of all, call out how impressive whatever you've been doing is. Or whatever you've been doing has been.
He's even lost his voice.
Exactly. Yeah.
So impressed.
I'm like blown away. Hi everyone, my name is Shefumi. Originally from Nigeria, so I was like raised in Nigeria and then came to Canada to further my education. I studied electrical and computer engineering at the University of Waterloo. And as part of the program, you got to do a lot of internships and co-ops, which was like obviously a privilege because I know not a lot of schools have that. While going through and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, eventually I decided that, hey, do you know what? Let me just like start a company of my own, you know. And so in my third year of university, I took a first stab at, doing my own startup. I was only 20 at that time, only 3 years older than,
Don't date us.
I know, but it was interesting because, being very excited and being in the space, I got to really build something, in 4 months with like a cool group of people. So we built like an Android app and an iOS app for students to manage their time. It was supposed to help them enhance their productivity. So that sounded like my first time figuring out what tech was. And I realized that, wow, I really enjoy this. And I decided that even though the startup didn't work out, I decided that I wanted to be a product manager. That's when like my first product role was at Microsoft, where I met Helen. So we prepped for Microsoft together, ended up working together. It was such a great term, kept on being friends, ended up going to Apple as well in a product role. After that, I spent like 2 years at Ecobee, which is like a smart home technology company that builds like smart thermostats, smart light switches, smart cameras. So I did a lot of like hardware / software stuff there, which is very interesting. I worked in a bunch of other startups until I decided that, hey, you know what? I think this is the right time to do our own thing, which is when, called up Helen. Helen's always like my first pick whenever, how there's like a first draft pick, like those sporting events, like Helen is always my first draft pick. So I called her up. I was like, yo, working on this thing, let's work on it together. And then she came back to Canada, and then we sort of like took it from there, and Collab is what it is today. So super, super happy and excited. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Very, very interesting story, Helen. I know that when I was checking out your profile, it said Seattle, Washington. I was like, oh, so she lives in the same state as I do, but you guys are both in Toronto now. Super, super cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, actually, that's also part of the luck. I think somehow everything happened within the same time span. When Shifumi was having ideas of, hey, maybe he wants to do something on his own. And when I decided, hey, it's time for me to leave Seattle and come back to Toronto, it was actually supposed to only be for like 2 or 3 months. But after we started working together and really picking up speed is when I actually decided to, hey, let me just stay in Toronto and not go back to Seattle.
Location. Before we get into some of the questions I have, just for the audience, one thing I love to do is always ask you guys what success looks like for you guys for the event. So we just got the intros from Helen and Shifumi. So after hearing these intros, are there specific insights you guys are looking for? Maybe a couple of questions that you guys want to prompt right now that I'll get into later. Just go ahead and drop those into the chat. I want to actually begin with both of your backgrounds. So a bit more non-traditional, I guess, Helen, in terms of earth sciences. Shifumi, you have the engineering experience, but can you guys just talk a bit more about the frustration in terms of actually breaking into tech and why it's so hard, what that interview experience was like, just to get a job as a project manager or product manager?
Yeah, so I think I'll go first, and maybe to set the stage for everyone, let me just explain what Collab is, first of all. So Collab is a 6-week program where we actually match aspiring product managers, product designers, and software developers into cross-functional teams, and we help them ship their first product together. The entire point of this is sort of similar to the experience I had trying to break into tech with no relevant experience, which is that you need the relevant job, you need the job to get the experience, but then you need that relevant experience to get the job. So you're just constantly spinning your cycles. Maybe you land an interview, but ultimately, at least for me, I was constantly getting rejected for not having technical experience. So ultimately, I think after all of my rejections, I did end up as a product manager at Microsoft. But I think that is really where the vision and desire to help other people with no experience get the actual experience that they need sort of started.
Yeah. And I think, for me, it's like, even being a product manager, there's always this like, hey, you have to have like a technical background. And I didn't know how to code. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I could like, write a lot of code. I think I was familiar with it, but I wasn't like good at it, So I think it was important for me to be able to show something to the hiring managers, which is where like when I worked on that like startup like Pave, I'll go to interviews and I'll just show them. I was like, hey, we built this. We have like 500 users right now, but obviously it wasn't going anywhere. But they were very impressed. They're like, wow, like you built this. Like, you'll talk to me more about that. I put it on my resume, and I think that's when I got the most calls I've ever gotten in my life, because it was like, yo, this is impressive. You built this thing, even though like it wasn't like never on TechCrunch, no one was ever tweeting about it. It was honestly just like lots of my friends like just like trying to help me out and like downloading it.
You on your multiple phones.
Yeah, so but I think it was just impressive that I took the initiative to be able to build something. And so I think putting those two things together, whereby hiring managers want you to just like show them what you can do. Right. A lot of people don't look good on paper. You see people like, oh yeah, I'm like on their LinkedIn's or whatever, I'm ex-Facebook, ex-Microsoft and all that. That gets the attentions of recruiters, but a lot of people don't have that experience, right? So on paper, if you don't look good, doesn't necessarily mean that you're not capable. I know several other very, very talented folks that never really got to work for big tech companies, but if someone wants to look at their track record, it's like, oh, you're working for this company that I've never heard of. If you're not able to communicate the value that you bring to a company or to an employer or with the skills that you have, then I think it sort of falls short. But the best way to do that is like, I built something. I think if you can say those words, I think that still shows that you're competent. It's like, I built something and the link is Zayn.com, and they go and it's like this like dope app that solves a particular problem. They're like, yo, this is actually cool. Tell me more about that. And then you're more likely to like get called for an interview or even get the job, because they're like, I really like, you're memorable, right? A lot of these people, they've done a bunch of like cool different side projects, but they don't really mean much. They're just like clones of all the things that already exist today. But you're showing that you've been able to identify a problem, solve it, and then actually like go through the steps of shipping it. So I think that is one of the ways that a lot of my friends and a lot of people in my network have been able to like succeed and, you know, overcome their challenges to be able to get into tech. And we see that is the best way that hiring managers ultimately use to say, you know, this is the kind of candidate that I want working for me in my company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just one thing before we move on to the next question is that when you think about getting a job, so first of all, Shifumi and I are really passionate about getting people from these non-traditional, non-technical backgrounds, like both of us, I do not know how to code, into tech, just because we recognize the value that it's brought to our lives. And we've also recognized the value that we've brought from these different backgrounds and diverse mindsets to the companies that we've gone on to work at. So I think first, we're just extremely passionate about that.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we understood the landscape a little bit more about what it really looked like to get into tech, yes, there's a lot of focus on, hey, you know, how do you hack your resume? How do you improve your interviewing skills, get a referral, et cetera, et cetera. But we felt like, hey, you know, all of those things are great and useful, but ultimately what it's going to come down to is your experience, because that's the thing that you can't fake, right? And as bad as your resume might look, et cetera, if you have that experience, if you've made that impact and you know how to identify and communicate that impact, there's just no way that you're not going to stand out because you know exactly what it is. Then it's just brushing up like some fine-tuning stuff. But really it's about getting that experience. And we didn't feel like there was a great opportunity for non-traditional people to get that cross-functional actual team experience. You know, you could work on a side project as a developer and that's great. But of course, in the real world, in tech companies, you don't work just as a developer in your own silo. You have to work with a designer, you have to work with managers, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why Collab is something that, you know, we were super passionate about just making in terms of solving the problem, but also in the unique way that we solve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that people actually have the opportunity to build something tangible and take this tangible thing and then learn how to pitch it. So it's very multidisciplinary, I guess, when I think about what the entire experience is, because it's not just one person building a product and then one person selling it. It's this one person has the opportunity to have so many different hands in it. So I guess when you did take this project, Pave, or even some of the current people within the core right now, what do you teach them about pitching this product on their resume or to a hiring manager? What does that communication look like between the build process and then just the sell for them to make sure that they do stand out in the interviews?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. One of the things that we started evangelizing is the ability to just like build in public, really just build that credibility. And I know it's a very, you know, common thing in tech Twitter, but it's very authentic because you're not only like showcasing and leaving breadcrumbs about like how you think, but you're also helping a bunch of other people. You're inspiring a lot of other people and you're building that credibility. And we all know that whenever, you know, any recruiter wants to like hire you, they check out your LinkedIn, they check out your Twitter. So they want to see that, oh, it's very interesting. Like, oh yeah, you know, you talk about these things, you're part of these communities. Those are very, very important aspects because they want you to join their company and also be promoters of the things that you do. Talk about it because that's how they'll also hire the best talent. So that's one of the ways that we do. And at the end of the program, we have something called a Collab pack, right? Which is essentially your product pitch, your live product, the live URL that you definitely ship, recommendations from everyone on your team, and a blog post about how the experience was like, right? Putting all of that together in a very well-told story of how you went from, hey, we just picked this idea or this problem that, you know, we've identified with real customers, and then I just like got paired up with this like 3 or 4 strangers, and all of a sudden, in like 6 weeks, we built something and shipped something. First of all, it's an incredible experience because anytime anyone comes to our demo day events in the past, they're like, wow, this is like really remarkable. You all didn't know each other before this. And you had to not only learn about these new people, but also learn how to build something with them, like while you're also still trying to like grow your skills. So it's very remarkable and it's very impressive. So I think the first things that hiring managers notice of how impressive that is, like in such a short amount of time, the amount of progress that you make, and also brings up their creativity because, you know, they're coming up with these projects by themselves, obviously with some help from the instructors and mentors. But there's also this other part of like, you're not being told like everyone else in your class, hey, today we're going to make a to-do list. Or, you know, for the next 4 weeks, we're going to make a weather app. everyone gets that agency and that creativity to come up with problems of their own. And we've seen how capable people are. People who are saying like, okay, do you know what? I'm scared. I can't really.
I've never done this before. I've never worked with developers.
And then you see people making like text messaging services, audio processing tools, progressive web apps, Chrome extensions, things that you wouldn't normally think of that like, I have to work at a company. You need permission to do this. You don't need permission to be able to build stuff. If you put in a team with, really high performing, motivated people, you're more than likely and more than capable of just like, showing out your best self and, really going forward and building something that will be really impactful, which is what we've seen our collaborators, do. And we're extremely proud of the work that they do. So shout out to all our collaborators, man.
I love it. And I also love the fact that you mentioned tech Twitter. I love the building in public. I don't build in public on Twitter as much. I grow in public. So that's where all of my thoughts go. I think Twitter is just an absolute hotspot for everyone to post just little bites of what their day is like, what they're thinking about. But love that everyone is building in public through the program. I think one thing you guys mentioned that was really interesting was this misconception that a lot of people have as they're starting to build these projects is that they can't do X scale or they can't do Y scale, right? So when you guys were beginning the process to build Collab, I'm sure you guys had a very great background in terms of being able to do so many different things. But for the things that you didn't know how to do, how did you learn that? Because I think as an entrepreneur, it's very easy to find different blockers or barriers to entry and then just say, oh, I can't do this. This isn't for me. I'm going to move on. But for you guys, what kept you in it and how did you learn along that process?
I think the first step was actually recognizing that, at least for myself, I was someone who was new to the space learning for the first time. So I was able to channel a lot of the questions that I had that might not seem so hard for people already in the industry, but are those beginner basic level questions, right? So some of the questions that you're afraid to ask and you try to type in Google, but you're like, I still don't get it. So I think we do a really good job of like actually being able to say, hey, dude, we're here for you to answer these types of questions. Like your mentors are here for you for that. Like this is the space where you should feel safe and supported in asking all of those like, hey, what is GitHub type questions, right? And so I think that's the first one. And to your point about the entrepreneurs finding blockers and like seeing, oh, wow, this is hard. I think that one thing that has been super beneficial for me as a startup founder now is honestly having a great co-founder. I honestly am so serious about it because like I said in the beginning, I did not think that I was going to have my own startup ever. Like I was that person. So, I went to earth science because I thought, wow, science is the way to go, right? Realized I didn't like it, went into tech, but I also went into tech only feeling like, wow, okay, this is just my job. Right? I'm always just going to have this really nice, stable job. Like, I don't need to take any risk. I'm not that kind of person. And my friends literally from university know me as the person who gives up super easily. So I find it really funny that you mentioned that because I think without a strong co-founder beside me, like there's no way that I wouldn't have given up, right? I think there's something about the way Shifumi and I work where it really is like, sometimes I feel like Shifumi is up here with his dreams and I'm like, this person who's on reality walking. But there's such a benefit to having someone with you that just pushes both of you forward in a way that you can't go on your own. And I do think that there's going to be so many hardships. And for any entrepreneurs out there, like, yes, things are hard. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It just means that you got to work hard at solving them. And that gets easy when you have a team and other people standing alongside you that believe in what you're doing, believe in the impact that you're making together, and are willing to also put in the time and effort to really figure it out. Shifumi, now say good things about me.
I think honestly, just to add to that with entrepreneurship, I think, after working on Pave, like my first ever startup, like failing was kind of difficult. Like I was like, I think I was obviously younger back then, many years ago, many moons ago.
How many moons?
Would say. And when you're young, you're naive. I was like, I'm going to build this like really great thing. And, without realizing that like then I didn't really have all the skills. I was also like more or less like a solo founder, which is like, I would not advise. So it definitely took me a long time to gain that confidence back up again. And I think the reason why, like every time I had an idea, I would always call Helen up is because I think early on, I think even more recently, she's taught me the realization of like 1 plus 1 can actually equals to 5. It's not even 3. It can equal, like, I don't, if anyone has ever had that, like, what does that mean? I think I finally understood it with Helen, whereby if you put two people together, you can achieve so much more than if you were just like by yourself. And I think Collab would not be what it is today, honestly, without Helen. I feel like it would even be like a totally different startup because she really just came out and was like, do you know what? Community, this is how it's going to be. And just like, even just that concept of like how our collaborators work today, a lot of it is like really her making it like just human, that human aspect into it, that empathy, that making sure that, everyone has that equal opportunity. As I'm not just looking at it from like a technical lens, hey, we need to ship products, let's get people to ship products. So I think we really balance each other out. So really think about people who can complement your skills. I think, everyone, regardless of anything that's hard, like Helen said, if you have someone who's like, okay, there's a problem. Anytime we experiencing a problem, whether I'm experiencing it or she's experiencing it, we come together and we just like isolate the problem. It's like, hey, let's solve this problem together. I think it's similar to like when you're working on a team. Like I think a lot of people tend to like point fingers like I, you. Like you need to like separate the people from the problem and just like tackle that. I think Helen and I are extremely good at that. Like it's never personal. It's like, hey, let's tackle this problem together. Let's put our minds together and then we'll figure it out. And I think it's been working well for us so far.
What do you mean so far? Forever.
Forever. I mean, so far, and I'm saying like, let me finish. And like, ultimately, eventually, like we certainly hope like it will keep us going because I think we work very well together. We barely argue. I think we're just mostly aligned on things, which can be scary sometimes because like, hey, when are we really going to have some of those like very difficult conversations? But I think ultimately we're very, very good at just like aligning on each other. And I think it's just because our missions are very aligned, like personal missions and missions for Collab. So if you're ever looking for a co-founder, definitely find someone who like your mission is like very aligned. Because at the end of the day, you're doing it. The person isn't making the decision for themselves. It's for the greater good of what you're trying to do. Going back to like isolating a problem, and you're like, hey, this is for the greater good. Like, hey, what do our collaborators want? This is the problem we're trying to solve for them. And that's sort of like how we've gone by so far.
Yeah, you guys are reminding me a lot of Joseph and Vicky and just what it's like to be around them. So it is really interesting. And Shifumi, one thing you mentioned in an interview that I was watching just like 10 minutes prior to this was being really self-aware and being able to journal and understand yourself. That way you can better help others. And so I'm curious, when you guys are matching characteristics or even when the audience is finding different co-founders to complement their skill set, how should they go about that process of discovering themselves or discovering other people that might be the right fit so they can go and create something really impactful?
Yeah, I think like you really mentioned, I spent a lot of times thinking about my flaws, I guess. Like, hey, what can I do better, right? And I think also having friends who are very transparent with you. And then like, Helen will tell me straight up, hey, I think you can do better in this. I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. Can you help me with this? So there's certain areas where I'm very aware that, hey, I think, this area isn't really quite my strength. And then we play to each other's strengths and weaknesses. That's like, hey, let's help each other out. And it's not a matter of like, hey, if I show my weakness, like this person will use this against me. It's more of like, hey, I want to put all the cards on the table so we know how best to like maximize our odds, And then once you know that there is a gap, you figure out how to fill that gap. So kind of sort of like treat it like a treasure quest or like one of those games that people play that's like, okay, you need to go to this next level. What do you need to go to this next level? You need to be organized. You need to manage your time. You need to have like a good vision. You need to build a good network and all of those things. And then you start to figure out all those things and you sort of put all those pieces together. So I think like ultimately that is what I've really spent a lot of time doing. And then we then talk about it. It's like, hey, I'm not really confident in this area and just being very authentic. So I think the fact that Helen and I have been friends for like a while, that's also helped because it's like I'm able to just be super open and be like, yo, I feel like I'm not very confident in this. Can you like help me look over this or can you help do this? And I was like, and vice versa. So I think like that's sort of like what has helped me so far.
It's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned that because when I was starting my first company a couple of years ago, that was one thing that my co-founders and I went through. We went through an exercise of actually being able to get to know each other better. But then with my co-founder and I, when we first started the company, we were really good friends prior to actually beginning and launching. And so it was an opportunity for us to us to, I guess, take like what the business relationship looked like out of the friend relationship and actually build something together and make something real. So I love that you mentioned being friends with someone for a long time, because you have the opportunity to understand more about them than just business, right? Or just about one specific thing about tech. And so there's a much bigger spectrum to go off of there.
Yeah, for sure.
So we even now finish each other's sentences. But yeah, no, it's definitely been a benefit. So yeah, keep that in mind when you're making friends. But that's not what everything is about. But just keep that in mind.
And another interesting thing I think about the entire experience is how it's such a multiplayer game, I think, in terms of different people that are part of the collab or collaborator experience working together to actually ship different products, or being able to just collaborate in one co-working space. How did you guys just develop the entire experience? Like, what were the intentions behind having people work together, having people not work together? How did that all come to be?
So like mentioned previously, we're very focused on simulating that real world experience of helping people specifically to get into tech, right? And so we realized that, okay, what does tech actually look like? When you're in the tech world, if you're working as a designer, a product manager, or a developer, there's no way you're working by yourself, right? Especially as a product manager. I'm sure a lot of the tech pod folks have heard of product management. Maybe they're interested in it, especially for product managers. Ultimately, your entire role is based on your ability to execute within a team environment, and also for you to be able to get your developers, your designers aligned onto the actual vision of what you'll be building. That is just literally the role. But when you really think about the ways to learn, of course, you can't do that on your own, right? You need these opportunities where you're working alongside people from different disciplines to actually write that spec, to consider how to build products, to leverage their strengths to ultimately come to the common goal, which is building a thing. And when you think about design and also development, that's also the same thing. So coding is just sort of a means to end, right? Like, you're coding to do something. It is to build the product that makes the impact that you want it to make. And so when we thought about it that way of, hey, how do we actually give people that real world experience that they're seemingly lacking, that they need to get the job? The only way to really do that is to facilitate these cross-functional teams that they can actually work in and just experience what it really means to be a technologist in the field that they're interested in.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And another thing that, just a question that came off of that, was really interested in terms of how you guys started to get different mentors to actually be a part of the projects. I think one thing that a lot of different programs lack is it's only focused on the innovator or the product manager, just the individual, and there isn't any mentorship, or just there's no linkage between the two, how this meets the industry. So how did you guys develop the mentor program, and what were you guys seeking out of talking to different people to come in and help some of the mentees or just current people within the program?
Yeah, so I'll answer that question in two ways. One way is like our messaging really resonates with people. You know, the fact of like people really have the struggle. I think it's just now that people are talking about how difficult it was. You know, I don't think, you know, we're in the era of like LinkedIn, you know, self-promotion and whatnot, and you know, people go through a lot of struggles, and all you see people post is I got this offer. And behind all of that, no one ever sees a lot of the struggle. So one thing that helped was, you know, I launched a book last year of like how to product, where, you know, when I spoke to people, I realized how, first of all, how difficult people, like they went through a lot of difficult stuff. So there was that. So I think that also informed like even just how we wanted to position each other, like ourselves, like as a company. So I think that really resonated with people. And second is like our mentors found us. So we get a lot of pings and emails like, hey, I want to mentor. Like we have way more people interested in mentoring than we can take. So unfortunately, I've had to say no to some people. It's like, hey, I'm sorry, we can't take this many mentors because we have like a vision of how we want our program to be. So we have people reaching out to us like frequently saying, hey, we want a mentor, really. And we don't even advertise it that much because there's like a small, if you go to our website, there's like a small line of like, hey, become a mentor. But then I get emails every now and then. It's like, hey, how can I be involved? I get LinkedIn messages because people resonate with that. They want to help out. They want to, you know, they feel that they wanted Collab to be available when they were looking for that experience. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the reasons why, like, I think on our mentorship side, we've gotten a lot of, like, good traction, and we have such a high bar for what we want our mentors to be, and how we expect them to be. So honestly, shout out to our mentors. They work very, very hard to make sure our collaborators are successful, and a lot of them want to mentor again. So we also have a lot of repeat mentors, people who have mentored like 3 cohorts in a row, who, like, after every cohort is like, Shifumi, please let me do this again. I'm like, you gotta let someone else get the chance to do that. But it's an incredible experience because they also benefit from really helping build the next generation of technologists, as we like to say. So it's a great experience all around. It's also part of our mission for that collective achievement, because we do believe it's not just us. You're putting strangers together, and more or less they're going to help each other out. The experience is reliant on how they all perform. So you have that sense of responsibility that if you're on your team, if you're the sole designer on your team, you want to make sure that you come through for them, which also gives you that level of motivation and accountability, versus when you're working by yourself, you can lose that by yourself and you're like, I don't feel like working today. But then you're working in a team that, hey, there's a timeline, they're relying on you. So similar to like our mentors, they want to make sure that, there's that collective achievement. They want to help send that ladder back down. They want to help really move things around and make the tech environment a representation of the world that they see. So I think that's sort of like how we've gained a lot of attraction with regards to our mentors. And we have mentors from like Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, also top companies as well, who have been interested in like participating. So it's really rewarding to see that a lot of people want to really help out, which is like what our goal is.
I would also add that one thing that we're super passionate about is that everyone has something to learn and everyone has something to teach, right? And what we don't want to be like is, here's this instructor and they're going to tell you what they know, and this is how you are going to do things, right? We are very much, hey, you have all of the capabilities and tools in your toolkit. We're giving you the space to learn from so many different people and yourselves and each other, so that you figure out and craft your own way of doing things. Because ultimately, like, nobody wants to hire like a cookie cutter way of doing things, right? Like, everyone can follow a recipe and make this dish. But what's really important, and what recruiters, hiring managers, your dream company, or even your own company in the future, it's all going to be so dependent on your own unique skill set, right? And how you approach problems. And so with Collab, we're really trying to develop that, hey, like, you, right? Like, you do things your own way. We have all of these mentors, all of these people you can learn from to see how they do things. But ultimately, there's no one way to do things. Just like there isn't one way into tech, just like there isn't one way into any dream role that you have. Ultimately, it's about crafting and forging your own paths for success. And I think our mentors really vibe with that messaging as well, and are more than happy to come and like share some guidance and really help out.
Yeah, so many different key tips in there. I think from a top down level, when you mention having mentors that wish that they had this program when they were searching for a job, that's one key thing where I think, like, for everyone that's on this panel, or in the audience rather, understanding more about what it takes to be an entrepreneur, how to create their own company. That's one thing that when you're reaching out to mentors, or when mentors are reaching out to you, just to keep that in mind, because I think you guys mentioned something that really optimizes for serendipity, where a lot of people just want to reach out to you because they want to be part of the cause. And then, like you said, Helen, they want to give back because it's so important for them to continue cycling through so many different PMs and what that looks like. So that is really interesting. And another thing you mentioned, Shifumi, was the branding part of it. So that's one key thing that I want to bring up just after we take like a quick 2-3 minute break. For the audience, if you guys have any questions, go ahead, put them in the chat so we can ask Helen and Shifumi, and then we'll get into the second part, which is more about the branding and gaining more consumer buy-in.
Cool.
Any questions from the audience? Have we answered everything? So we got one question coming in from Vicky about how did you guys know you could quit your full-time jobs to pursue Collab. What did that process look like, and how did you guys know that the bandwidth was available?
So yeah, actually for reference, we started Collab in September 2020. That's when our first cohort actually ended, and we both only went full-time in March 2021. So it's actually only been like 2 months of full-time. And I think there were a few signs leading up to, hey, like we should probably make the jump. The first was actually that we just had a lot of collaborators. The core team is just Shifumi and I, and we, during like the March period, we had over 65 people going through the program. And we had another close to 30 mentors on top of that. And so it was like, whoa, this is very, very unmanageable, especially because he was working as a product manager at a company called Copper based out of SF, and I was working as a PM at Microsoft. And it was like, wow, okay, this is very hard to balance, especially when you want to do both things great and you're also seeing the impact of what it is that you're building. So I think first, just straight up time and like logistics and mental health and balancing life. I think the second thing was seeing the impact again of what it is that we were building. At that point, someone who had gone through the program previously had landed a not even beginner job at Microsoft as a product manager. And it was in basically my similar role to me. And I was like, whoa, somebody who went through our program landed, where I am now. And that's super exciting, right? And we were seeing all of these people landing jobs at companies like General Motors, Twilio, their first tech jobs ever, right? And so, I think seeing that, knowing that, man, this is like, there's no time. And also being like, wow, this is a lot of fun. I think on Shifumi's end, he's always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think for me, I was honestly just having so much fun working with Shifumi. I was back in Toronto, so logistically, I needed to move out of the US anyway because I was actually there on a work visa. So I was like, I don't know if I want to go through all of that, renewing my visa and stuff. My family's here as well. And so it just made a lot of sense. And I really wanted to optimize for learning and just all of the new things that we could be learning in this new space. And in the 2 months since it's happened, it definitely has paid off, and it's felt a lot better as well.
I think honestly, having like talked about most of it, I think I know for a lot of people it's a scary decision. But I think two things for me, or two quick things. Number one, Helen, for sure. The fact that she was going to do it with me, I think that was like a selling point. I think that was like a no-brainer that, if we're going to win, if we have Helen on the team, like there's no way, like if Helen's doing this, like so that was like the first thing, because it gave me that confidence that, number one, I think she believed in me as a co-founder, that like, okay, I think like we have something here and we can do this. So that vote of confidence, even just from your co-founder, I think, trust me, I think there's some validation that, it's good to seek out. Just don't definitely seek out validation from everyone, but having that validation from someone who you think very, very highly of, I think that definitely would help that, you both figure it out. Two is honestly just like accelerating the impact. I think like being a product manager at like a fast growing startup, I was like working and leading teams and like leading projects. Like I just led like a, huge initiative that we recently did. And, it just became days where I roll out of bed, literally just like walk through the entire day up until when I roll back to bed, and was continuing like eating lunch during like meetings and everything to just like get through the day. Realizing that like, yeah, that's great, I'm making this company money and all that, but knowing that we can make so much more impact with Collab. Like I think we had so many more people wanting to go through the program, but just like not enough bandwidth. So I was like, what, I think it's important to just like decide and make that decision and say, what, I want to go all in on Collab. And yeah, so that's sort of like how we made the decision. And we're just like, hey, I set a date. I was like, this is the last date. And then I was like, yeah, we're doing this.
Sayonara. Though for reference, again, we did work part-time, full-time hours on Collab for around 6 months, right? Because we were building up to that, hey, like, should we not? Like, what is this really going to look like? Do we feel like this can sustain our livelihood? Because again, like we were both working at really good companies as well, right? So it definitely, I think for anyone, just recognize that, yeah, like maybe get to a point where you do feel confident. I was seeing a bunch of advice on like, oh yeah, you know, make sure you have like enough runway, first of all. Make sure you have sort of like whatever safety nets you can build up for yourself, right? I think for a lot of people, it's great to have family safety nets. If you can move back home, etc. For Shifumi, his family doesn't live here. And for me, I actually support my family as well, right? And so recognizing that, oh, this is a risk that might affect more than just you, right? But also being honest with yourself on like what that'll look like, and whether you can take that risk. There was also a lot of advice that I saw that, hey, you should be making at least what you'd make in your normal day job, on your side hustle before you leave. And you know, spoiler, that is not the case. But
yet.
Yeah, not yet. But I think for us, it was really about recognizing, hey, we know where we can go. We've solved a bunch of hard problems, and we're really excited to keep solving more while making this impact that we actually want to see on the world. And so it was just sort of like, you know, we can eat ramen every day for a little bit.
Yeah.
Love the key indicators, and also just the consistent focus on impact. I think that's one thing that, like you mentioned, Shifumi, it gets diluted in such a big company. You're making impact on a very micro level, then you're giving it to someone else, and then they get to make the impact on the macro level, right? Because they're the executives making the decisions, or they're the managers of the manager giving the project to someone else, and so you never really have the opportunity to actually make the impact. And so I love that you guys mentioned that in terms of what Collab is actually able to do.
Yeah.
Another question coming in from Cindy was, you guys talked a bit about the mentorship. She's currently creating a mentorship for first generation students. Just talking about how you guys found the right mentors, and you guys obviously have a mentorship. I don't think you guys have a mentorship program, but I guess you guys can go ahead and speak on that. And I know Shifumi, you answered part of this question already. So yeah, just go ahead and give the TLDR there.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say we have a mentorship program, but we do have sort of like a mentor track where we obviously pair mentors with our collaborators and with teams to be able to go through our program. In terms of like, you know, finding the right mentors, like I said, a lot of them find us, but there's also a vetting process. I think, yes, we do believe everyone can teach something, you know, everyone can learn something, but ultimately we have a bar that we want to set for our mentors. We want to make sure that they're able to support our collaborators in the way that we would like them to, because we want them to be able to help them ship products. So we want someone that has experience like shipping multiple products or leading product teams, because you're not just overseeing a product manager. You're overseeing product managers, software developers, and product designers. So there's also that component in their job that we want to make sure that they're able to help out. Because whenever you're throwing a question, you want to be able to make sure, you know, whenever you say an answer, you also sound competent, you also sound credible, and you're also helping people out. Because you never want an experience where it's just like, oh, my mentor doesn't know the answer and I don't know the answer. Like, it's this whirlwind of like, wow, no one knows the answer. I feel like, you know, you never want everyone to feel like you can never get the answers that you want, even though sometimes our mentors might not always have all the answers, but we want to make sure that, you know, they have the right approach and the right ways to uplift and empower people to also get the answers for themselves, to also find those answers, right? And it takes a special type of person or a special category of person. So I think it's just like being able to structure the way you find your mentors. Like, we have an interview process. So I've interviewed every single mentor who has gone through the program and all the people who have wanted to go through the program but haven't really been the right fit. And ultimately, we want to make sure that, you know, based off of their answers, based off of their application, based off of how much thought they put into all the things that they do, that they're a good fit for. Not just even for that, they could also be very good, but they also have to match with our vision. Like, what is our vision? Are they more for just doing it for themselves? Or are they doing it for the community? You know, are they for equal opportunity, or do they want that one-to-one connection? So really, it's a bunch of things to help determine what the right mentor is.
Yeah. So Cindy, for what you're trying to build, I would just advise that you really have that solid vision about the types of mentors that you want. So after you know that, then I think it becomes about finding the mentors. And I think the easiest way to do that is to just show up where you think the mentors are. So if you're very active on LinkedIn, that would be an example, or active on Twitter, being able to find like the right hashtags, the right groups where the people that you vibe with will be is going to be super critical. And the only way that they'll want to help you, well, maybe not the only way, is also if you sort of like join that community as well, right? So definitely being active there and helping them recognize that, wow, you're someone who wants to help would be helpful. And then lastly, to what Shifumi said, is about making sure that you also set a standard for your mentors, because a lot of people can help in different ways, but especially for first-gen students, they might want a certain type of mentor specifically. They might want someone who's more supportive. They might not want that same mentor that is going to be very prescriptive, right? And so having all of those things in mind will help you hone in on the types of mentors you want, and participating and being part of the community will help you find those and get access to those people.
Yeah, and I think one thing you guys mentioned that's super, super crucial and is definitely overlooked at I think all entrepreneurs are overlooked at some point. It's really about fit. So one thing that they mentioned is everyone that is part of their current mentor track fits Collab, fits the different mentees that they have within the program. And so when I think about this question, obviously not the expert here, but there are two things that come to mind. Number one is understanding desired role. So what's the intention behind the mentor actually being there? How can they provide value? And then I think the second thing is unique background or experience. So I know more tech companies are starting to become diverse, but for the most part, it's still, if you don't fit this persona, then you can't be here. And so I think that's actually one of the biggest places where the tech industry fails, is there are too many people optimizing for a formula, not enough people deformalizing the entire experience. So I would definitely take a look at those two things, especially the unique backgrounds and experience, because then you can start to perspective match with different mentees and mentors and ultimately build the best experience for this mentorship program. But all the luck with that. Now back to you two. One question that I did have based off of where we left off before we went into question mode was about the branding. So you guys have the color palettes, the names, the slogan, "You belong in tech," the newsletter, all of these different products. But I think one thing I was really compelled by was just how everything came together. And it was like this beautiful little sandwich of just Collab and everything together. So I guess, how did you guys create the palette, the branding, and why were you guys so, I guess, key on making sure that everything flowed and was consistent so users knew the logo and the colors?
So I think, speaking about the colors specifically, the values that we want to put forward with Collab is, inclusion, belonging, but also approachability and friendliness. I think one of the things that we were very intentional with was trying to break a little bit further away from just the sometimes very hospital-esque vibe of a lot of tech companies in particular, especially because we felt like, hey, our entire branding, our entire vision is all around "you belong in tech," right? And bringing more diverse talent into the industry and also empowering diverse talent to do more with tech. And so we wanted to have a space where people came and they felt like, wow, okay, this is different. This feels comfortable. This feels comforting. And so that's actually why we pushed really hard for those types of more vibrant and like friendly colors.
Yeah, and I think it's like, we spend some time, and Helen doesn't like me saying we spend a lot of time thinking about that, because it's like, why are you spending your founder time doing your branding? But we spend a lot of time thinking about it, at least thinking about it, being at the back of our minds. And another thing about Helen and I, we mentioned that, look, we don't want people to look up to us. We want people to like be us, or like be better than us, like, go to higher heights that we never become. And I think that we want that to show whenever you look at the things that we want to do. I think whenever we even make a post, it's like, we want it to be friendly and approachable. We want you to be able to engage with us in a way that is friendly, and you have this person that's in your corner. We don't want this like, tech vibes and it's very like, elitist. Tech can also be very elitist. Like, if you didn't go to this like famous school, if you don't have this CS degree, people will look down on you. And I think that's one of the things that we found with a lot of people. It's like, you need to feel like you belong because you're capable. And honestly, the best teams, the best people that I've ever worked with, the most talented folks I've ever worked with, you'll be surprised with people who don't necessarily have degrees or, went to a fancy school, but they can do the things that they want them to do. They're also the most pleasant. They're also the most humble people, and they're also the most willing to help. Versus people who feel like, oh, I got here just by myself. It's made for only people like me. And there are a lot of people like that in tech. You'd be surprised. So we definitely don't want to give off that vibe. We want to give off that vibe of like, if you go through Collab, you have that sense of responsibility that, hey, if anyone else, wants struggling to get in, you also feel that sense of responsibility to help out, even if it's just by a conversation or pointing them in the right direction. That is sort of like what we really, want to communicate with anything that we do, which is why, a lot of people participate in our video campaigns. We have like our You Belong in Tech video campaigns that are happening right now, where lots of people, are sharing their stories from their difficulties and challenges. More people are coming out and saying, hey, look, I've been struggling, or I struggled this way, and then this is how I've made it and overcome that. And I think it takes people who don't know Helen and us to just resonate with that message and just be like, oh, I want to be part of this campaign where I'm sharing my knowledge. And I think like over 90% of people who are participating in that, we don't even know who they are. Like I end up having to like ping them and say, hey, thank you for participating. You really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So yeah, honestly, it's just like thinking about what is the outcome from what we want to communicate, and just like putting like myself and Helen forward. It's like pretty much the brand is like me and Helen just like combined. If you had to like just like combine ourselves together,
like our personalities,
that's how like it sort of like shows up in everything that we do.
Yeah. One interesting thing that people might not recognize is that we actually also try to use as layperson's terms as much as possible. So that's why we're very casual just in general. I mean, we're sitting on a couch, right? Like so we want to be using words that people understand as well, without the jargon, without the, what does that actually mean, right? Like we want to break down what it actually means. When I first started interviewing for jobs, I got asked, hey, what do you know about Agile? And I didn't know what Agile was. I thought it was like a Excel or like a Microsoft Word. Right. And so it's so hard, though, when you're out of this space to really understand what something means. And so we wanted to do away with all of that and just straight up, let's just be honest. Let's just be candid. Like it is just what it is. Right. And so that's actually all of the things that we try to incorporate in our branding as well.
Mm-hmm. And so couple different things there, just throughout insights that I got and hopefully the audience got as well. But using your mantra, Helen, let's just break it down for the audience. So one big thing is, I think the word belong is the best thing within the entire tagline. I think it's much better than any other verb that's like out there, just because it's resonates so much. It's that welcomes people in a way where they know that Collab is the safe place for them to be and they can thrive there. And then second thing, Shifumi, that you mentioned was you guys spend a lot of time on the colors. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs spend too much time with either the technical details or maybe building a website or thinking about the product, and they don't spend enough time on branding. And I think that's where a lot of different people actually fail, is they don't spend enough time picking the right colors, picking the right palette, because businesses and startups have personalities too. Yes, the people behind the company matter a lot, but I think the startup should have its own personality that's either portrayed through the social media or through the website. And I think it's really, really interesting that you guys mentioned that, because I think more people need to spend more time on it, because it's the first thing that people see. They don't see the people behind the company first. They'll see the color on the shirt. Whether you're at like a trade show and you're walking up to someone, they're going to notice like what the colors are of the company, or when they check out your landing page, the about us is not the first thing that they see. They'll check out the collab and who is part of like the cohorts or the mentors or what the program is. And so it is really crucial for the branding to be key. That way everyone can buy into it.
Yeah, especially if it is a B2C type of company. B2B, I would rethink that a little bit.
Yeah.
But especially for B2C type of companies, then yeah, for sure.
Perfect. So before we end it at 6, just because I want to be cognizant of your time and then also everyone in the audience, I had one last question just about entrepreneurship and really building a company. So what's one thing that a lot of people don't know about building a startup, and then what's one thing that people overlook?
Shawty not going first.
One thing that people don't know and one thing that people overlook.
Yes.
One thing that people don't know, I think, is the amount of time it takes. I think it's still, I feel people are not as aware of that. One thing that I always like to say, and I just want to keep this short, is like, usually whenever people want to do things, just the general as humans as we are, we think, oh, I want to do that. without the realization of how much time it takes. And I think I finally understood that when I was writing my book, where I was like, a lot of people say, hey, I want to write a book. I want to start, let's even say something simple. I want to start a YouTube channel, right? And the first step of that is very easy. Like, you can set up a channel like in like 30 seconds to 3 minutes, depending on how efficient you are. But people need to think about, people might not have thought about the content that they want to upload, the cadence that they want to upload, and all of those things. So you see people upload like 2 or 3 videos and then they stop. So a great majority of people actually stop. So there's that, whereas like you don't realize how much work it is, right? And so I think that's the first thing. Really understand that if you're trying to do a startup, it's really a long journey. It's not even like right now, we're just getting started. This is like a 10-year thing that we're building, and we're just like in the very early stages, and we're aware of how much work that we have to do, and we'll continue to do that work as long as it takes. The second part I think people overlook is the persistence. A lot of times things will be very and extremely difficult. You hear no a lot. People will tell you shouldn't be doing this. People will like criticize everything that you do. And I think that persistence, because like the startups that are alive today is because they persisted, is they didn't decide to throw in the towel, and they were like, you know what? The ones that like died decided that they had to die.
Yeah.
So it's all about this, like, it's important to just be as persistent as possible and just like, show up every day, have that tenacity, just like do all the things that you have to do. It's all about doing anything and everything, which is why they say VCs always invest in people, not necessarily the ideas. Because they say that, you know what, Zayn, at 17 years old, he was really like pushing it and really like doing all this great stuff. I think like he has that persistence that, when he's 27, he can definitely build that $1 billion company. So if you haven't shown that track record, I don't think like, people would believe in you. So I would say those are those two things. Like, don't be persistent, but definitely don't discount how difficult it is because of how much time it will take to get anything done. So that's mine.
I think for me, the one thing is that I didn't realize was super important is just that community, which again, one is the benefit of having a co-founder, someone to push alongside you, but also is developing a friendship or a group of friends or other people in your network that are also motivated and looking to do the same things. Because it's going to get hard, right? And there's going to be times where, at least for me, like I don't always want to talk about Collab either, right? But then you find it hard to focus on other things because you're thinking about this all the time and you're so passionate about it. So yeah, having that community of other people you can bounce ideas off of who are just as motivated and looking to learn, it is going to be really important. Otherwise, it will get very demotivating at times, and it will get very lonely if you feel like you don't have anyone to talk to. And then I would say that my second point, similar to Shifumi's point, is really that persistence and perseverance. Sometimes it really does feel like, wow, there's so much to do. We're like here. And of course it really matters depending on, what kind of founder you want to be, because honestly, not everyone has to be the same type of founder either, right? Like you don't need to put yourself into a box of what you think a founder needs to look like, right? You could be a founder and still be working like full time, and like, you could be an indie hacker and you can just build things for fun, and that's all fine. And you can consider yourself a founder there too, right? But I think for the type of founder that Shifumi and I want to be, it really is about recognizing, wow, okay, there's a bunch of stuff to do, but it really it starts with that first step. So I would actually say that, hey, if you make a YouTube video and you forget to you stop, just remember, just pick it back up and keep going, right? Because you're gonna have to do that. And it's gonna be a lot of work, but it's also gonna be a lot of fun. You're gonna meet a lot of cool people during it, but it's absolutely worthwhile.
Perfect. We will end it on that note. We did post just a couple of resources for everyone in the audience. We have Collab's website. Make sure to check that out. And then also to connect with Helen and Shifumi on LinkedIn. Thank you guys so much. And audience, thank you for your insightful questions and just for the asynchronous energy of this entire event. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.